we're in a toxic, barren place at the moment, and by standing in the middle of the road with trade battles that are likely to kick off, it's just not a good place to be. We are now going to be caught in a tug of love between the US and the EU. The US, with Nigel Farage, are going to try and throw a lasso around the UK. When we were in the EU, we were in the ideal position because we were in the EU, calling shots within the EU and part of the EU market. And at the same time, we were the liaison point for the US because of the common language, because of the proximity and shared culture. Now is not the time for weak sauce. A little bit of tinkering with the EU, tinkering with Donald Trump, trying to be friends there and try to pretend that there aren't era-defining existential issues for the UK in terms of who we are in the world. They are here. They are now. It is time for bold visions and bold actions. My name is Mike Galsworthy. I am the chair of European Movement UK, a 75-year-old cross-party British political institution all about UK and European relations, currently campaigning to get us back in the EU. I am also the founder and co-director of the Bylines network, which is independent of Byline Times and is a set of 10 citizen journalism publications around the UK. I was following the election in the US right up into the night of the election, and then I knew that it was going to be a busy day the next day either way, so I went to bed early and then got up early to see the news. My surprise was mainly that it was so clear so early. I hadn't known which way it was going to go. Obviously, I hoped it wasn't Trump. But the fact that it was so clearly Trump so early meant that that day was super busy in terms of everything that we wanted to engage with the media and social media on. I thought it was probably going to be Kamala Harris, but I wasn't confident of that in the slightest and certainly wasn't putting out any predictions on that front. Because the turnout in the States and the secret reasons for why people might withhold what they were going to vote to those around them or to anyone polling them, I thought would be a big factor. So I thought it was likely to go into the messy zone where it was really contested over the next few weeks. I was dead wrong on that. It was clear the next day. So with Trump back in power, instantly there are trade and security and geopolitical shockwaves going around the world. On the UK, Europe at large, Ukraine in particular, the Middle East, and the balance of power with regard to trade. And there are lots of complex mixes that come from that. Firstly, with regard to the UK, we are now going to be caught in a tug of love between the US and the EU. The US, with Nigel Farage, are going to try and throw a lasso around the UK and pull it into the munificent embrace of a forgiving Donald Trump. A lot of the UK public will react to that badly, and certainly on the left and the centre will want to get closer with Europe. Europe is now looking at the UK differently because Europe wants to protect its eastern flank and its own trading interests. And so actually getting the UK back on board is something that they're actually a lot more motivated to do now. And then when it comes to Ukraine, both the UK and the rest of Europe absolutely desperately want to protect that and are worried what Donald Trump may try to force on that front or withdraw from. It knocks on to the Middle East because even though Donald Trump said that he wants peace there, he has already appointed a lot of very hardcore pro-Israel people to be his liaison with Israel. So he might want that concluded in a way that would jar with a lot of the world. However, it is unlikely that Benjamin Netanyahu will get a war with Iran out of Donald Trump because Donald Trump doesn't want to start new wars in the Middle East, and also his buddy Putin is friends with Iran. So I think there's going to be real tug of love and influence again within the White House between Russian influencers and Israeli influencers. So there are a lot of geopolitical dynamics in the mix. China will be looking at it anew because China may see the opportunity to look again at Taiwan, look again at its relationship with the global south, and really steal a march on India, Africa, South America, with lots of what it feels that it can offer. So we're in for an extremely turbulent time, not just in geopolitics and the trade and security, but also within the UK. And the whole Brexit questions, whether Keir Starmer likes it or not, and I'm sure he doesn't, are going to be opened up again in terms of the UK's future in the world, economically, who we hitch up with, and in terms of morals and standards, who we want to be aligning with. When it comes to Trump and the Middle East, I don't think that he is going to be a good influence. However, he is so random that you cannot make predictions here. There are also other dynamics that could happen within Israel or within the Middle East at large that would make things more complicated still. So all we know is that it is likely to be very volatile. But Israel is also in overreach at the moment, and how this all plays out is going to have a lot of people very worried, myself included. So in terms of the UK's relationship with the US and our shared language and cultural history, and where does that go now? What happens to the special relationship? I've long thought that the term special relationship should be retired. It's a bit vapid, it's on repeat, and it's a kind of platitude that doesn't mean much beyond its own repetition. I think obviously there are strong cultural ties between the UK and the US. The UK has always been a sort of blend of Europe and the US. You know, with Europe, we've got the shared architecture and royal families, history, and, you know, all that long history going back. But in terms of more modern culture, in terms of theatre and Hollywood and music, we've got a stronger shared space with the US. In terms of politics and in terms of business, we're sort of balanced between the two. And so the UK's position, sort of culturally and economically, between Europe and the US has always been fascinating. And I would say that when we were in the EU, we were in the ideal position because we were in the EU, calling shots within the EU and part of the EU market. And at the same time, we were the liaison point for the US because of the common language, because of the proximity and shared culture. So we were the policy talking point for Europe, for the US, and vice versa. And at the same time, by being in the single market, we were the gateway to the single market for Asia. And then on top of that, we had the Commonwealth and could bolt that in as well. So it put the UK, for its size, an incredibly powerful position. And outside the EU, we've lost that connector status. And that is something that we should really try and get back. But culturally, our relationship with the US, we are, as a country, to the left of where the US is at the moment. And I think that the sympathies in this country, if you look to where the country wanted to vote, Kamala versus Donald Trump, it was solidly in the Kamala Harris camp. Even amongst conservatives, they were split. It's only Reform UK that were for Trump. And this absolutely matches a lot of Europe. So I think the dynamic with the US is going to be Keir Starmer is going to try and maintain what influence he can, but at the same time, the UK public may be appalled by lots of things that Donald Trump does. And I actually think we've got a massive opportunity in here, because if things go really badly in the US, for those that are more like-minded with the UK and Europe, we could see a lot of brain drain come our way. If we have the budget and the immigration structures in order to take on, I'm particularly thinking of the universities here, as well as some sort of green tech industries and things like that, but particularly with the universities, people don't understand about scientists and intellectuals around the world. They don't just go where they get paid the most. They want to go where they can have influence, and they want to go and support the countries that they've chosen to set their life up in. So if it goes badly in the States, there's a lot of brain flow that would normally gravitate to the States that won't, and a lot of talent in the States that might look elsewhere as the new place where they actually want to live their lives and contribute. So I think we should be really open to that as well. Is there an opportunity for the UK and EU to reset because of Trump? Yes, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing it already at European Movement UK. Our membership has gone up. There's more chat in the media about what this means for UK-EU relations. The EU already has more appetite for the UK again. You see an opportunity here for the Lib Dems to really bash the government on it, and Labour backbenchers to bash the government on it. And because we're in an environment now which is a lot more choppy, the rules are changing. So when rules change and the environment changes, you have to adapt. So Keir Starmer's 3 red lines on single market customs union and free movement, I mean, why? Why stick to that straitjacket now if everyone's saying we're getting no growth by your current sort of budget, and you've admitted it, whereas Brexit eats up 4% of GDP like that? You need growth if you want to be able to survive and not get taken over by Farage at the next election. There's every reason to cut the red tape by cutting the red lines, increasing youth mobility and mobility freedoms that help our economy and help our youth as well. It really makes a strong case of why we should be getting back with the team. And Donald Trump provides an excuse for that, if you will, to break the mindset that Keir Starmer has got himself stuck in. And he should absolutely be doing that, because we're in a toxic, barren place at the moment. And by standing in the middle of the road with trade battles that are likely to kick off, it's just not a good place to be. So the man needs to be bold. He needs to take this as an opportunity. He needs to see that Europe is reaching out to him, and he needs to see that in the country, this is what people want. Last point on this is that at European Movement UK, we commissioned some polling in the week that people went to the polls in the general election. And we asked, if Keir Starmer gets to power, should he reconsider his 3 red lines if that were to help the UK economy? It was overwhelming, yes. Certainly for Labour, it was over 71%. But even with Conservative voters and Reform voters, it was yes. Weirdly, they prioritised the economy over the 3 red Brexit lines. And so that's all you need to know, that the country, Keir Starmer may have banged on about his 3 red lines. People don't care. They care about the economy. They care about opportunity. And that trumps the red lines. And so you need to have full awareness of that, because otherwise he's going to get himself stuck in a really awkward place when he should be taking the opportunity of the moment to be bold and give this country a boost. Do I think it's possible that the UK will rejoin the European Union? Yes, and even more so now. I think we've done the experiment of Brexit. We all see that it hasn't been good. The only opportunity from Brexit is now apparently getting in with Trump. And even in the Conservative Party, it's split down the middle, but even more Conservatives, as I was saying before, wanted Kamala Harris to win than Trump. You can't stand in the middle here. It's basically US or EU at this stage, and the population at large would much prefer the EU. If you do the polling on whether we should stay out or rejoin, it's majority for rejoin. So all of the momentum is there. The demographics with it. Donald Trump just ups the risk and the stakes and the urgency of it all. But that's absolutely where we should be going. And I feel confident that that's where we can rebuild, because life is long, and history is longer. And we are currently in a completely non-beneficial geopolitical position with where we are. And it's urgent that we get into one that actually works, and everyone can now see what European values are about. As America goes the way it does, as China goes the way it does, India's not providing a better model for humanity. But the European model works. It's robust and it works. It's collaborative politics. It's pluralistic. It's defense of common values. And that's what we should be getting in with. Again, as a responsible country that wants to pull its weight in the world and build the right kind of forums and standards for humanity going forward, we need to get back in with the team. We need an Avengers Assemble moment in order to protect all those things which are British value, British European values, as we set up in the post-war era when we saw the horrors of what had just happened. That's what we need to recapture, those British European post-war values. So if the UK does get back into the EU, it will be very different from how it was before. I mean, the EU now is not what the EU was before. Before it was more fractious. Essentially in 2016, all the way from 2008 to 2016, Europe had been, adding other countries, there'd been an experimentation with Esperanto that didn't work, that everyone was picking up. Then there was the science program that did work, and that worked really well. Then there was the single currency, and Europe was doing lots of things that were very ambitious and experimental. And 2008 really brought it home. Does this structure hold up under stress? I mean, real stress that people weren't anticipating. And that was essentially the origins of Brexit. And when we left the EU, there was this notion that the EU was then going to fall apart. There'd be the domino effect. But it didn't happen. The EU got tougher because of Brexit, because there was that common threat. And so they pulled together and negotiated with the UK brilliantly. I mean, everyone knows that the Commission, which is what we all built together to be tough in the world and go out and be a fantastic negotiator on trade deals and other things, the Commission is really superb compared to David Davis and the kind of government people that we had on that. So Europe is tougher, and then COVID made it tougher, and then Ukraine made it tougher. And now people can see again that Europe of the 1990s, when those new countries came in, you've got now Moldova and Georgia and Ukraine all want to get in with the EU for that defense of markets and defense of freedom and defense of democracy. And that is a lot more powerful now. So if we were to rejoin, we would actually be rejoining a tougher beast, but would be rejoining it by a new vote of, yes, we want to get in. A new education and appreciation and awareness in the public of what it is that we are joining, and it's about principles. It's about defense of quality of life and community and consumer standards, you know, our food, our water, our air, our protection of our small businesses and of fundamental rights, and working together to secure borders, militarily, intelligence-wise, everything. And so I think in that kind of dynamic, the UK then takes on a new role and would want to come in with real philosophy about what Europe is about and really wanting to take up that leadership role. And that's what a lot of small countries missed when we left, because we had been having that champion role, but culturally hadn't fully embraced it, right through down to our citizenry. But now that this Rejoin movement is being driven by our citizenry, then I think the embrace of the EU and the UK together would be much more deep and meaningful and purposeful, and would put us in a position where we as a country have a lot to offer the EU and help reinvigorate it, even with leadership in many places. Two places. One, the notion that these are power elites sitting above us telling us what to do. And then the other is from immigration. You know, it was open borders, they were sending in their immigrants. Those two factors were the main ones. There's a little bit about the economics, you know, us making a contribution, why should we put our money in there instead of here, without understanding that it comes back with massive added value when you're part of the same market and you're also investing in shared systems. But those were the three things: the sort of the sovereignty, no one can tell us what to do, the immigration aspect, and then to a degree, putting money into it. Of which the sovereignty one is the only one that's still sort of holding any water in the minds of those that still want Brexit. They've seen with immigration, right, that we have just traded the younger, shorter term stay immigration that we had with the EU, that was basically jobs focused going back and forth, with longer term immigration from further afield, usually people who bring families and then settle down more permanently because they're coming from further afield, so it's a big thing for them to do. The Conservative Party, even though bashing immigration, had to reach out and bring them in for the NHS and for social services, absolutely to keep them surviving, but then also to stop our economy flatlining. So we just got that GDP growth, even though GDP per capita dropped. If they hadn't let in as many immigrants, we would have been going into recession. So they made that trade-off calculation and then screamed foul when, you know, immigration boomed. But they knew what they were doing. So people can see that you do need a baseline of immigration, but you've got better control when that immigration actually comes from our nearest countries on a mutual free movement scheme. With the aspect of sovereignty and not being told what to do, they still can't find any laws that we would scrap. So it's a case of, okay, we've given ourselves the right to write things for ourselves, but all of our business sectors are saying, no, it was pretty good. And do you know why it was pretty good? Because it was over 24 democratic countries writing these laws together. So they checked out pretty well. And we've actually found nothing that we can write differently that gives us significant advantage. And I think that's the main point. But finally, I would say on that front that the understanding of what the EU is about fundamentally needs to be corrected, because during the Brexit debate, those that wanted Brexit thought that this was the UK and here was the EU. It's a ceiling, and we're trying to get up, but the EU is keeping us down, taking money from us, writing laws for us. If we just get to the side, our natural tendency, whoosh, will rocket us up, you know, like those pictures of the hot air balloon drifting away happily. Whereas those that advocated for the EU said, no, this is the UK, and the EU sits under us with common standards, with stripping away of bureaucracy, trading, And by investing in it, it lifts all boats. And this means that if we go to the side of it, we're likely to drop in standards and drop in trades and drop in customer protections and drop in freedoms. And I think pretty much everyone can see for themselves which of those have come about. Those that still advocate for Brexit tend to say it's made no difference, it's made no difference. But most people have seen the drop. Those arguments are going to come back all into play again. We're going to have another prolonged Brexit referendum because the existential place of the UK in the world now is brought into sharp relief by the arrival of Donald Trump. So is the UK too sleepy at the moment and too grim and gloomy, and thereby making itself ripe for a Trump moment here? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we learnt that from looking at Germany and Olaf Scholz, and we look at that from Kamala Harris's model of, oh, things would continue as they are now. I mean, essentially, we've had Brexit, but that doesn't mean that we're not ripe for another populist reactionary surge. And in fact, my biggest fear about Brexit before it happened was that it was so tight either way. It didn't matter either way it was going to go. We were going to have really frothy times. If Remain had won, it would have been by a small margin, and we would still have massively frothy times. But my big fear with Brexit was that if we voted for it and then did it, it would impoverish the country, particularly if we'd had a crash-out Brexit. And when you have a country impoverished, then that's absolutely fertile ground for right-wing populist dynamics, right? So the threat is absolutely still there. So for Keir Starmer, now is not the time for weak sauce. A little bit of tinkering with the EU, tinkering with Donald Trump, trying to be friends there, and try to pretend that there aren't really big era-defining existential issues for the UK in terms of who we are in the world. They are here. They are now. It is time for bold visions and bold actions. Do I think Keir Starmer can carry that off? Probably not. I don't think he's got that presence. But the Labour Party as a whole, and the Lib Dems as well, and from our society, we need to now, in this glum and gloomy environment, actually say, what is Britain's future? What looks like a bright British future that the world would admire, that our youth can get into, that our youth can say, that's the future that I want to go into, that is about a greener world, a more sustainable world, a cleaner world, a world with jobs and opportunities to travel, to engage, to set up your own businesses, to embrace everything that AI is bringing along and make it work for us, to be wealthier and have more agency. What is the model for that? Because it's not coming out of the government at the moment. So someone else, somewhere, is going to need to start laying out the pathway to a better, bolder, more engaged, more opportunity-filled, responsible future for this country. And that's what we need to grasp. And a big, big part of that story is going to be the re-embrace of Europe and all of those standards and all of what those standards point towards in the competitive, frothy world that we have at the moment. I've been Mike Galsworthy. Thanks for watching. If you want to follow more of what I do and get on board with everything that I'm doing, find me on social media, but also make sure you are following the Bylines network and all the different bylines, and importantly, make sure you are following and becoming a member of European Movement UK. So you can look that up easily, europeanmovement.co.uk/membership. Come join, because it's building fast.